One of my favorite franchises of all time is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. The first film is one of the best animated films of all time, and I really like the sequel. It's pretty solid, but the franchise disappeared and fell into obscurity and completely died off. But why did one of Sony Animation's most successful franchises completely disappear? Well, let's talk about the slow death of the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs franchise. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is based on the book of the same name. The premise was pretty much the same as the movie, except some of the characters and the art style was more realistic looking. In September of 2009, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs was released, and while it wasn't a huge success, it still made a profit with $243 million worldwide against a $100 million budget. The film also garnered a lot of praise from critics and audiences for its lovable and memorable characters, wacky sense of humor, and very imaginative creative animation. The movie was so beloved that it gave Sony confidence in turning it into a franchise. In September of 2013, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 was released. It made a little more than the first, but not a lot. It made $274 million against a smaller budget of $78 million. The movie didn't live up to the hype with critics and audiences and didn't end up being as admired and loved as the original. There were people that even hated it. Because of the film's mixed reception and unimpressive box office performance, Sony paused any plans for a third film. A year later, the infamous Sony hacks happened and revealed a lot of the inner workings at Sony Pictures and how much of a confused mess it was. Because of this, the company planned to restructure its animation division and rethought their priorities, which resulted in a lot of their projects getting scrapped, such as an original film called Can You Imagine?, a Medusa film, and of course, the animated Popeye film, which many believe was swapped for the Emoji Movie, and along with that the potential plans for another Cloudy film. The franchise wasn't dead though. After that embarrassing time, Sony planned to reignite interest in the franchise by producing an animated TV series based on the movies airing on Cartoon Network in 2017. The series was not well received. This was a prequel series taking place before the films and retconned a bunch of things from the films, such as Flint and Sam's relationship, having them grow up together in Swallow Falls, whereas they didn't meet until the first film, as well as characters that weren't made until after Flint invented his food machine, like Barry making cameos in the show, as well as the fact that the stories and plots were not that interesting. The show had a very formulaic format. Flint would invent something, it would go haywire, and he and Sam would have to fix it. Kinda like a certain other show, and that left a lot of fans underwhelmed, which led to the show's ratings dropping. And after season 2 wrapped, Cartoon Network didn't order a season 3. Thus the franchise completely died off and disappeared after the show ended, leaving the entire IP dormant and forgotten. So why did the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs franchise die and drift into obscurity? Well, one was the mixed reception to Cloudy 2. People either tolerated it or outright hated it, but they didn't love it, and despite its box office success, I think Sony realized that the audience interest in this property was dwindling and beginning to decline. That was further enforced by the absolute obliteration of the show. People had simply lost all interest in this franchise, and I think Sony felt that. So they decided to pivot all their focus on the Hotel Transylvania franchise, which became the most successful movie in a while after the failures of Arthur Christmas and Pirates Band of Misfits. It was well received, enough, and had a lot of appeal to the audience, which made it a guaranteed cash cow. And since Cloudy 2 divided the audience so much, it took the absolute certain success of more installments away and threw it into question. If they made another Cloudy movie and it flopped, it would have been extremely bad for the studio and likely would have put them into bankruptcy. At the time, they weren't at the level of Pixar or DreamWorks, which almost shut down a few years later if they didn't get a buyer, meaning any massive failure would have possibly been the end for them. Especially such an expensive project like another Cloudy movie. The Sony hacks were also a damaging factor in the development of a Cloudy 3. It revealed the studios were an absolute mess and had no direction or idea what they were doing. So they had to reorganize the studio, which resulted in a massive overhaul and a change in direction from the current business model of the company. They were going to prioritize more unique ideas and less of capitalizing on the long-term viability of their IPs, with the exception of Hotel Transylvania. If they weren't well received by the audiences, they weren't going to keep them going. While Hotel Transylvania lasted until 2022, and it looks like that Motel Transylvania series isn't happening since they haven't given any updates. That was the exception, because while the box office for the films weren't anything remarkable, they were grossing more and more money with each installment, which kept the series lucrative. Even though Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 was successful, the box office was not a sign of an increase in ticket sales. It made only over $200 million just like its predecessor, and since it didn't make a jump of any kind, it's easy to say Sony didn't see any point in keeping the franchise alive. So overall guys, the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs franchise is a really good series. It started off strong with the first film, and while I like the second film and even find enjoyment in the spin-off show, the state of the franchise was dire by its conclusion. The audience had abandoned the franchise and lost all interest in it. The decline in enthusiasm for the franchise was emphasized by the lackluster critical and audience reactions to the sequel and TV show as well as the box office of said sequel, and Sony changed so much as a studio after the overhaul, and I think that they might not have had any interest in revisiting the franchise. After all, they had Hotel Transylvania, a franchise that was making more and more money with each installment. Why would they even want to continue a series that had a mediocre financial intake when they already had a proven cash cow? And so because of that, I think Sony decided to move on even before the hacks, and considering all the success they had with the Hotel Transylvania and Spider-Verse movies, I'd say their decision paid off. I would have preferred if they gave us one more Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movie to tie up loose ends and wrap up the story properly. But it's understandable why that didn't happen. There is still hope that we could see Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 3 in the future, if Sony gets really desperate for ideas. I mean, they keep bringing back Open Season for some reason, so who knows? Maybe they'll pull an Incredibles 2 and make a sequel anyway. It's been almost 15 years since Cloudy 2, and they even have solid source material in the third book. I know these movies aren't direct adaptations of the books, but it has a good foundation. What if Flint's food machine didn't just affect Earth? What if just like it created sentient food creatures on Earth, it did so on other planets as well, and these food creatures need Flint's food machine to survive, so they plan to steal it and the crew have to get it back. It would make for an excellent plot and would bring a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. It's highly unlikely considering how the franchise left off. I still hold out hope for it, but for right now the franchise is dead. Anyways guys, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.